What is up, you guys? Welcome to another episode of the Prog Pod, the podcast all about progress. Today, I'm here with Greg Halliday, and I'm excited to be joined by him as the founder, president, and CEO of Solle Naturals, which is a wonderful company that I'm excited to learn more about with you guys today as we go throughout this episode. But first, I just got to tell you a little bit about Greg. He is so generous, and he's so actively involved in the community and in giving back. That's actually how we were able to connect through Hope Squad. Solle did a wonderful campaign this month that I was privileged to be a part of and participate in, where they're really invested in youth mental health. And so I'm excited to dive into that a little bit more today. But first, let me give you a little introduction to this podcast and what we're all about. I said the Prog Pod, we're all about progress and becoming the best version of yourself. And I started this project kind of in the midst of COVID because it's something that I wish that I had when I was younger. Particularly my middle school years were a tough time for me. And it was a time where mental health really was something I was lacking in my life. And so this project, it allows people to come on and talk about their own personal stories of progress, which you have a very rich story to share with us today. And then the guests, not the guests, the listeners can then kind of take and learn what they can and garner what they can from those episodes. So I'm excited to dive right in, Greg, by asking you to tell a little bit your personal story that you share with your wife and how the founding of Solle Naturals actually started.
Oh, that is such a hard story. First of all,
Pretty loaded.
Thanks for having me. It's a hard story to tell fast. And Donna actually, after a number of years, felt just comfortable enough and ready to record it. And she actually recorded her story on YouTube. And that was not easy for her, even after all these years, because you have to kind of live through some of that. And sometimes, I guess, in all of our lives are not easy times. Living through them once is good.
Yeah.
And then we'll just move on. But I think when I think about like why Solle started and what happened in our lives, and particularly with my wife, it really was just, I think, what life brought to us and how we responded to it, that kind of led us to think about different things. And something that you said earlier, when you talked about like middle school years and being able to have like mental health in my life, I actually love the way you say that, because that's, to me, a thing to be. It's not a hard thing to talk about if you learn a little bit about it and you're comfortable with it. And if we do talk about it, we share a lot of valuable information. In fact, in the case of Donna, we kind of learned as we went. Some things weren't talked about at all. When she was a teenager, she was an exchange student in Germany. And her first experience was coming home earlier than she wanted to, after like 6 months instead of a year. And that happened before I met her. So when I met her and we got married and we embarked on our family and our journey together, I had not seen what really hard times were for her. When she got to a point with we have 6 children, and that's a lot. I always joke with everybody, you have to have at least 6 children in Utah or they make you move out.
Sure, yeah. I should have added dad to the introduction, man. Congratulations. Okay. That's a huge...
Well, and you know what? It's a huge commitment for both of us, but I think it's even harder for women because they have to carry them and they do all this. And watching what Donna went through, for some reason, we don't know why exactly, when she was pregnant with our one son, we have 5 girls, 1 boy. When she was pregnant with Ethan, it was really, really difficult. That experience sent us on a path of learning a little bit more. And what we learned wasn't necessarily true, meaning it doesn't always just go away. It's not just always a postpartum. Just because it happens around a pregnancy can also mean that it's just part of your life at a deeper level where it's not necessarily resolved how we're going to progress and move forward.
Sure.
And that was the case with Donna. And so we actually had one more child afterward. And Ethan was our only boy. We had 4 girls, and Donna was like, I want him to have a brother to play with because he's outnumbered. And so I always joke, his little brother is Grace because she's a girl.
There you go.
We had one more, and we do girls. But it was really hard. The pregnancy with Grace was even harder for Donna. So she went from a hard situation to an even harder one. And she got to a point we were going to travel to China, and just like to cut the story like really, really short. She wasn't able to come. She decided to do a more in-depth look involved taking a test, going to the hospital, doing a full test with her doctor. And when the results were pretty much it's as severe as it ever gets in the way we measure mental health stress, that's when she decided to take actions bigger than just like, I'm going to try to deal with this in basic ways. I don't. So that's how it all started with us, and then lots of things happened after that led to Solle.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can tell that has been a very complex journey and road for you, and it's a beautiful one. That video from your wife, I did come across it in my research, and it is so profound and so touching that something personal to you and an experience that you and your wife found together, you also were able to extrapolate that, have some empathy, and build it into something that could serve so many people with Solle. And so I commend you for that. And also, I want to touch on something that you mentioned just in your description of that, which is that mental illness and the things that we can't always see are real. And they're not just going to go away. So tell us a little bit about the process of learning about the connection between your body and your mind and your mental health, which is so foundational to this company.
Yeah, that is really the part that Solle plays in all of it, because I think we've learned that there are several important things, several important parts of support that help us progress.
Yeah.
One of them for sure is nutrition. And I think one thing I like to say when we do a Solle training, I'll tell people that I think this is just my understanding. Most people, when they hear about nutrition and they think about the choices they make in eating, etc., agree that if I make better choices, I'm going to feel stronger and better. That part people agree with physically, like more energy, just less. I don't know, less discomfort, and all those physical things. But I don't think most people have an inkling. Maybe it was just me. I think a lot of people were like us, that nutritional choices can have just as big effect on how we feel emotionally, and
inside.
not just emotions, but all of how our brain works, focus and memory, and any measure or description that you could make to how our brain works can actually be affected in a major way by nutritional choices. And the choices that we make, like buying what we buy at the grocery store, what we make for ourselves, yes, they can make a difference. But here's the thing, you can do really well in that, what we discovered, and still not get there nutritionally. And that's what led us to herbs. And then more particularly when we discovered adaptogenic herbs, just a particular classification of herbs, they just have components that aren't typically in other foods, number one. And so they fill gaps, is the way I like to look at it.
Okay.
Gaps that are there that are needed. They supplement. And then secondly, they're more concentrated. A small amount of them, and just adding a little bit into the diet on a regular basis can make, for a lot of us, all the difference. And for everybody, some difference, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And particularly in your story with your wife, she was experiencing an imbalance, right? Her hormones were not within a healthy range. And so, of course, she needed that supplementation through the herbs.
Yeah, and in fact, you said hormones. And the thing is, you're right on that, because so often what we do is with nutrition is we try to pick and choose something to cover the symptom that we see. So like hormones are out of balance, so it's very common to do hormone therapy. And it actually can bring some great results. But it actually can do the opposite, because it's hard to guess. One thing about adaptogens, and one qualifier to be an adaptogen, is they have active components on either side of imbalance. So an over amount or an overactivity or an underactivity. So like an example would be nopal cactus, prickly pear cactus. Nopal is known for balancing blood sugar. There's a doctor from San Diego, her name is Maria Fernandez. She showed that nopal has components that lower sugar levels in blood, and it also has components that raise them. So they don't cancel each other out. What happens is nutrition's not like a medication. It's presented what the body's lacking and needs. It pulls, it sees and pulls.
The rest it flushes out.
And that's the way I see it, and that's the way we've seen it work for lots of years. And so adaptogens are like that. So glands, one of the adaptogens we use in one of our products, it's known as a sort of a hormone balancer. And so people get concerned, like, can I give that to kids, teen years?
Is it going to mess with their pubescent bodies?
They already have enough and it doesn't have any hormones in it. In fact, what it does is it works with the whole balance, that whole axis Our scientists could describe this better than I can, but I'll
Yeah,
just give it a
sure.
go. The HPA axis, which is what the pituitary gland, the hypothalamus, and the adrenals.
Sure.
So there's this connection in between those three major centers that affect hormone balance. And so you can balance them out without using hormones if you get the right nutrition. And it's an interesting thought, and that's one of the concepts that led to Solle.
Yes, absolutely. I can tell you definitely have a depth of knowledge of this, and the scientists obviously could explain it better than I also. But in my human anatomy class, we've been learning about the pituitary gland, this little, tiny but mighty gland within your brain that regulates all the other ones and all your hormones.
Yeah.
But the main takeaway that I can see already from all this that I'm excited to be learning about is that your body sometimes has a cure, often has a cure within itself, has the ability to stabilize and regulate.
I believe that. I think the body, if it has the right raw materials, so if we improve, if the nutrition is the raw materials, if we give our body better or more variety, things it was missing, then our body can do what it's built to do, which is to find that balance and find that zone where we're
Sure. Yeah. That's wonderful. Tell us a little bit more about, I think that the conclusions that you and your wife drew from your experience are a little bit different from what most of us might go to. First of all, your wife did have experience with prescription medications and
Zoloft.
So she experimented with that route and saw the effects of that. But you also had a different perspective because you were already more familiar with herbs than I think the general population is. So tell us a little bit.
By luck, because that was my profession. I had a friend that invited me to, and that's how I started working with herbs. A friend, and I thought they were weird. I thought people were crazy that did them because I didn't understand. And he knew that I had asthma though and allergies. And without going into my own story, I saw enough. It didn't fix everything, but it changed and improved it enough. I thought, okay, there's something here, and that was my own journey. But I will say this about drugs and prescription drugs. Sometimes people, when they know that you're a proponent of nutrition and natural solutions to problems, can think you're against the rest. We're not. And if you want to make me kind of like bristle a little bit, is be critical of people who are working on something and they're using a prescription drug for this or for that. For Donna, it was a super important bridge. We just knew because of our experience on it, really because of she knew, and she explained to me that over time, it's not going to, over time, her body would neutralize it. They needed to keep increasing doses. So because I now understand, it's something synthetic that's forcing the body in a very needed way in the moment.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
But over time, the body's going to push back at it. Whereas nutrition comes in, the body uses it. It's not forcing it one way or the other. It's providing.
Yeah.
And so I think for people who are they're in a situation where they know they need something major. For a lot of people, those are great answers. I just say, but look at the nutrition as well, because that's where you're going to build for longer term, and then you can use the drug as needed until you're able to. In a lot of cases, not be on it. In Donna's case, she hasn't been on a prescription drug for at least 10 years now.
Wow.
Yeah. But she did have that as part of her journey.
Yes, and absolutely, it's a very personal journey, and we would never want to judge anybody for what they have to do to take care of themselves.
Right.
Knowing that it can be a holistic approach. Have you thought about your diet? Have you thought about your exercise? Have you thought about these environmental factors that really can play a big role?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for you in your personal life, I'm sure that there is no shortage of stress as a leader. With the different responsibilities that you take on, and also as a father and as a husband. So how have you made progress from the different experiences in your own life and learned about your own mental health?
So if I look back overall, I do feel like there's progress. But in some areas, because I'll be 58 this summer.
Oh wow!
And
you didn't tell me these make you look younger.
Yeah, I wish they could give me more hair. I do think that there is progress in some things, much more understanding, progress in how I feel what's going on and know what nutrition I can actually increase. I know that sounds kind of funny, but it's a real thing. That's why we created different products. In Soul, we have them categorized by balancing, calming, lifting, or clarifying. That's how we group them together.
So you'll kind of know what you need.
All the products are positioned in there, and if you use them, if you use that nutrition, on a even if you're rotating on a consistent basis, you get used to what changes they make. And so when things happen or you feel a certain way, you kind of know, hey, I'm going to ramp this up a little bit for a couple of days or for a couple of weeks. So that's one thing I've learned.
Wow.
I mean, in terms of like letting stresses get the best of you and sometimes being less than your best, sometimes I wonder if I'm learning. That's not to try to, that really is just to be completely transparent with it. I don't feel like, sometimes I feel like I can be thick-headed. And I guess I'm sharing that because life's always going to be unique and different, and that's okay. This is more about, to me, this whole mission that we've had is about learning and being around resources more than being perfect or even never having to need yourself. Because to me, I believe sort of we all need it for different reasons and in different ways, and so it's worth the education for everybody.
Right.
It's just part of living.
Yeah. That makes me draw some parallels with the work that I'm more familiar with Hope Squad. That it really is so much about the resources, and it doesn't need to be about placing blame. It doesn't need to be about blaming yourself, certainly, but it is taking accountability and saying, you know what, maybe I do need more support in this area. Maybe I do need to give myself some slack over here where things just aren't working. Yeah. And also, not to compare the leadership burden that you're under, but this year I was student body president of my school. And there were certainly times, man, where I felt like I was doing good, but then I hit something and it was one step forward, two steps back, and things fell apart even though I thought that things were awesome. So
that's life.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being honest about that. That's awesome, man. What would you say throughout that journey have been some of the most important leadership qualities you've been able to develop in yourself? And then also, how does that affect the culture of Soul overall?
So let me answer it this way. These are the leadership qualities I'm working on. Because it is hard to judge yourself.
Right.
It really is. I know something I want to be right at the center is listening and observing and understanding what other people are going through and what they're doing and how they're looking at whatever part in the whole group project they're playing. Because it's really easy for me sometimes to look at the task that has to be done, divide it up, think of what I'm going to do and what others should do or would. Yeah. And I remember our chief scientific advisor is a woman named Allison Caldwell Andrews. She did her postdoctorate at Yale. She's a clinical psychologist. Wow. And I don't know if this is her quote. I heard it from her, so I'm giving her credit. Okay. But the quote, I've got it on a little sticky note sitting on my desk. Sure. I want to frame it. That's why I kept the sticky note sitting there. It's been there for like 2 years. Oh, wow. But she was doing, we've been around 10 years, so this is a recent find for me. Okay, this is recent working on leadership. But her quote was, use the task to improve the relationship. And I needed to hear that because it's easy to use the relationship to get the task done. Right. I've got this great relationship. I want to work on it, and it's important to me. And I know if I have a good relationship, we'll get things done better or right. But I actually shouldn't look at it that way. I should never look at relationships as a means for tasks, even though they do make the difference in task. Yeah, absolutely. Any task is, to me, you can work through it and come out the other end stronger with whoever you're working with. And that's inside the company. That's with our partners outside. Soul actually is set up in such a way that we have a lot of partners outside the corporate umbrella. Then we have our employees under the corporate umbrella. We have our manufacturing, which we have in a separate umbrella, but they're also partners and owners. And they're all different relationships. So I wish I could feel like I have a solid view of all of that, But what I can say is some things have become more clear to me that as really real keys in that. And I think one of them is the way we see relationships. And I hope that Soul always is a company where people see the relationships placed higher than anything else. I mean, the product quality has to be high. They have to be pure. They have to be clean. They have to be reliable. But the relationships, to me, products will sit somewhere and do nothing without a relationship, without someone to share them or to help you through it, or you taste it, or we do a lot of drinks, a person, what's different, what's the same, do you like it? I mean, the support to me is the power of Soul. I hope it always stays that way.
Yes, absolutely. And that shines a light on what is another core principle of Soul from the outside looking in, at least, which is longevity. Yeah. You want people to be able to use these products throughout their whole life and reap benefits from them throughout the whole life. And also, I love the word relationship that you use there, because that's what leadership is about. And the relationships will last longer than any project that you've got on your desk at the time.
The projects change over time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's part of progress. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Just so I can get a little bit better grasp on it personally, what exactly, can you give us a broad overview of your products that you offer at Soul right now?
Yeah, we have a number of drinks. Anything that we carry is plant sourced, not because we believe no one should ever eat meat, but because our body actually, this is something over years we've become convinced of, it more easily utilizes or leverages nutrition from a plant source. There's a much wider variety of nutrients. Plants are pretty amazing. And the more we study about them, the more we realize that we know a little bit, and there's all this out there. So there's more being learned all the time. But we use a lot of them in drink form because it's easy to, like the Soul Vital that you got to taste right before.
Yes.
Because you can get a larger amount of the nutrition more easily in you, and also because any of us drink enough water. Just generally hydration is a major plus for stress management and health management. Yeah, we have a number of capsules for times when you have specific objectives and you don't want to be tasting everything. There are some things that are better not tasted.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose.
We have powders, like protein drinks that are mixtures of a lot of adaptogens with proteins as well. We don't do anything sort of one piece. Everything's a blend, because we try to, in each of the 4 categories of Soul that I mentioned earlier, we try to balance the formula as much as we can. So that the idea is, over time, is kind of what you said earlier. We want to make smaller but significant changes and keep them over time, rather than I'm going to do this big thing in 3 months, and fix whatever is going on, which is going to get unfixed after
it's
that.
Not realistic. Not real. Sure. In the research that I did, also, I learned that at a certain point for your wife to manage the feelings that she was having, she would have up to 60 tablets a day of different herbs. Is that right?
Right. This was before Soul, and that was one of the reasons that led to us deciding to found the company. She was taking a lot of, and this was a very reputable company, still around, but she had to take so much of these herbs. But the thing is, she did it for a couple years. She took them for many years, but she took that quantity for a couple of years because it enabled her to slowly wean off Zoloft, which is, at that point, she had been using it for a couple of years and she was ready to, and she felt like, I need to move beyond this. And that many herbs made it possible. But it was a lot to take, and a lot of people won't do that. They won't even try, and so they feel like, I don't have a choice. And so that led to our first formula, which is a capsule, and that's the formula that she could take 2 to 4 of those.
Much more concentrated.
And it was simply, it was more concentrated, but also it was purely from adaptogens. So that was that little light bulb moment for us. Was why are 6 herbs able to take the place of, I don't remember, the number had to have been 30 or 40 in all these capsules, and more, probably more than that in all these capsules. Why was that so? And that's one of the qualities of adaptogens. They all have many different components in them. And so that was sort of what the event that led to the very first formula.
Discovery. Absolutely. Along with the wonderful accomplishments of your business on the inside and the discoveries you're making, the constant progress, you're also very invested and interested in giving out to the community. And that connects with the relationship part that you talked about earlier. Hope Squad has been very grateful for the ability to work with you throughout this month. On the month of May is Mental Health Month. Could you share with us a little bit what that piece of giving back to the community means to you?
Well, that is that's part of life that makes, I guess I'll just speak for myself, that makes me feel good.
Yeah.
And
That's a pretty simple answer. I like that.
Simple answer. I mean, it just makes me smile. No matter what's going on, if I can sit and think of those things, I can be happy. And Hope Squad in particular is one that we always want to be committed to. Really within, I think Soul was maybe only around maybe 3-4 years at the most. And my wife was doing some substitute teaching at Lehigh one of the elementary schools here in Lehigh, Utah.
Yeah.
She, the vice principal there, had just brought Hope Squad into the school 1 year before, and she asked, because Donna is my wife is open about her life experiences. She asked if she'd be the faculty, and that's how we found out about Hope Squad. And she just loved it, loved it. She told me all about it. We were able to go over to a couple of the events when they did Hope Week. They did Hope Week every year there. Yeah. And we loved sponsoring part of that. That was where we got our taste of Hope Squad at Soul. And once first-hand taste. And once we had it, we knew this is something that we wanted to get behind.
And now we are back, you guys. I apologize. There was a brief little complication with our technology here, but I'm glad to be back. And over the course of this conversation, what's been exposed to me about you, Greg, is that you're a very giving person. And that's a very admirable trait. And it's so important as a leader, because I believe that what a leader truly is when they're their best is a servant. And this company, Soul, really has started for you out of such a place of service and love for your wife. And, here's this problem. How can I give her a better solution to it? And then not only give it to her, but then share it with the world. And so for that reason, I really hope that Solle Naturals will continue to grow and make progress. And I believe that it will. In fact, nothing else could happen. So I'm curious, over the course of that journey, how do you overcome the monster of ego that might sometimes try and slip in there and ruin this selfless thing that you've created?
That is an awesome question. I think, I worry if Soul ever goes through a period that is so dramatic that, I don't know, maybe the growth is so dramatic that we all decide we're all that. That's to me a worry. We've been just steady, and honestly, because it's been steady, always growing every year, but always wanting to and needing to do a lot of work for every step of the way. Thankfully, that hasn't been a problem, even though I'm really, really happy with all the success that Soul has had. I think I'm thinking through your question here.
Yeah.
If I look at Soul and what is most directly affecting the growth and the change and the message that's getting to people, it would be that our leaders, those leaders that we support. So not us, not so much what we do, although we have to do our jobs well in the office, but we're not the ones doing all these classes and all the mentoring and all the events and I can't even name it all on social media, and a lot because of the pandemic, Zoom, a lot of Zoom training. It's what we call our specialists. That's the name that we use. They're the ones who do it. So I guess if anyone's going to get a big ego, it might be them, because they're the ones that deserve the credit.
Sure. Okay.
But what's funny is they're not that way, and I think it's because they just sincerely, they love to help people. They are in it for the long haul. They don't just help you and move on.
Right.
They're still there.
Yes.
A year later. In fact, we were listening to some testimonials, some experiences of people with the products just this last week, and I probably get on 7 or 8 Zooms a week throughout the country, and some in other countries where they're sharing. They'll just invite me on to share a word or two about products or something. Okay. And I would say in almost every one of those, there is a story or two of someone who, I've been 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. Here's what's changed. Yeah. And that is what makes me the happiest of all, because those are long-term friendships. Yeah. That's what I think if we stay committed to those, we don't ever bail on those. I don't know that we'll ever get the ego. I sure hope not.
No. Yes. I thank you for that honest answer. And I figure that because ego and because pride is something we all deal with and experience, don't ignore it, but instead be aware of it and how you can treat it. And I really think that oftentimes service is the medicine for that ego, to let you know that you're the same as everybody else. Yeah. And when we build that relationship, build that support, and work together, then that can kind of protect us from ever falling into that trap of ego.
Absolutely.
I've loved learning with you and connecting with you today, and also working with Solle Naturals throughout our campaign this month with Hope Squad. My final question, and I know that your story is so loaded with progress, but I just would like a brief summary to finish it all off. How do you know personally from your own life that progress is possible?
I think because I feel differently when I think back at some hard times, they don't feel the same to me now as they did when I was going through them. And that repeats itself, meaning like if I reflect back next year or months later, it's still that way. It's a more calm reflection about those times. I don't get as anxious about it. If I do get a little anxious, it's less.
Sure.
So to me, progress is how I'm able to reflect on things and deal in situations that might have been hard and feel like, okay, I'm happy here, I'm good here, even if it's not perfect.
Yeah.
That's to me progress.
I've made peace with it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, feeling a degree of peace with it is probably the biggest factor.
Well, thank you so much, Greg. This has been Greg Halliday. I hope you guys have loved learning from him in this episode.
Thanks, Noah.